How can you tell the difference between setting a boundary and just flat out trying to control people? A whole bunch of you responded to a video I made last week that was about subtle ways that supposedly nice people attempt to control you. And a couple of the things I said sparked some comments from people who were either confused or annoyed with me because it appeared to them that I was saying nobody can ever set a boundary or express concern about other people or else they're controlling. So I thought I'd make a follow-up video and just read some of the comments, both thoughtful and critical about this, and respond to it so that we can do a little deeper dive and talk about this, because for people with complex PTSD, that fuzzy line between expressing our boundaries and holding them and control is confusing, and it deserves a little extra time here. So in my post last week, I listed 9 subtle control strategies that people might use against you. And just to call your attention, when somebody's trying to control you. And the first 2, I think, were what set off the kind of alarm bells for some people. One of them is what I call outsourcing responsibility. And that's when somebody tries to make you walk on eggshells and change your behavior and jump through hoops so that they don't get triggered. And doing that instead of kind of, healing and learning to manage their own triggers, or not going into situations that they can't stand. The example I gave in that one was a person who doesn't like to be around drinking getting so upset that other people keep drinking alcohol around them, even though they know that they don't like it. All right, so that was one. The other one that seemed to set off a few comments of the people were bothered was what I call concern shaming. And that's a word I made up for something that I've witnessed, where a person has a criticism, and because maybe they don't feel like it's fair to criticize, or they don't want to see themselves as somebody who criticizes, they mask it as just being concerned about you. Are you really sure you want to go for that goal? Because that's going to be really hard for you, and how you kind of break down and get fragile around things. All right, so that's like shaming somebody in the name of concern. But as some of you pointed out, there is a time and a place to express concern for people, especially when they're in danger. So let's just get that out on the table. If a person is in danger of harming themselves or other people, who cares if you look controlling? Do whatever you can to stop the bad thing from happening. Now, the fact is, when you have CPTSD, the line is confusing. And I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of alcoholics and addicts in my life. And even though I was going to 12-step programs to get help with how to deal with that in a sane way, because it drives you nuts. It drives you nuts living with somebody who has an addiction. And does tend in many people, including me, to bring out controlling tendencies. You just want to make it stop, and you're just like, gosh, just listen to reason. If you keep doing this, you're going to lose your job. If you keep doing this, I can't be with you. If you keep doing this. And all of this, the control can kind of creep in as a substitute for actually having boundaries. It's a form of a fake boundary, right? Controlling. It's not really a boundary. And I use the example of drugs and alcohol because that's something, and probably many other things are too, and it's debatable, but whether you pressure that person or make threats or ultimatums against them or not, it probably influences very little whether they're going to change. That doesn't mean you can't say it. That doesn't mean you can't express boundaries or preferences or wishes. And that doesn't mean you can't leave them. So the thing I want to say to clarify what is a boundary versus all other, kinds of behaviors that we're talking about. A boundary ultimately is that point where you walk away. You can say, if you get drunk, I am going to leave. But the point where you leave is when that boundary becomes real. It's all talk up until that point. It's real when you walk away. And you get to set boundaries. But what I hear in a lot of people with CPTSD, and honestly, especially people who are younger maybe, or newer to recovery, is the belief that this is a right, that I have a right to say, I have a right to make somebody stop drinking. And this is going to sound harsh, but we actually don't have a right to make anybody do anything like that. We have a right to leave, but they have a right to keep drinking. It's almost impossible to influence people in every way that we would like them to. And the thing is, so if we get away from drinking and things that are dangerous, but let's just say we don't like somebody, I don't know, dressing in a sloppy way or something, something that doesn't endanger anyone, but you don't like it, and you say, I really wish you'd dress in a nicer way. I really wish you would. I don't want to go out with you unless you're going to dress nicely. You can see how this can turn into controlling behavior. If it's really a problem for you, it sort of becomes your problem, right? So that's what this was about, is that continually criticizing somebody and expecting them to change is a form of criticism and control. There is a gray area where when somebody is in danger or when somebody is making a mistake in their life, yes, a good friend may show their good friendship by saying, you know what, I think you're making a mistake. So I wanted to read to you some of the comments that came in. So Melody Lacey said, "We who have PTSD or CPTSD keep hoping that by controlling our environment, we will prevent future attacks." You got it. You've got it, Melody. You've nailed it on the nose. If we could just work hard enough, then things will never go crazy again. And it's hard to know the fine line between teaching and micromanagement. And there it is. Melody, you've laid the foundation for what the dilemma is here. All right. R. May said, "I wouldn't want other people to nag me, but I wouldn't want people in my life to sit back and watch me engage in unhealthy or destructive behavior without saying anything to me or encouraging me to be a better version of myself. This intimate connection and trust are what differentiates my personal relationships with friends and family from those on the periphery and mere passersby on the street." So that is a beautiful example of how somebody who actually has a good relationship could be a positive influence by calling somebody out on something that's a problem. But I just sort of invite everyone to look at that and say, can you imagine how that veers off into strictly criticizing and attempting to control somebody? It is good when a dear friend says something. And I recently had to give a lot of thought to deciding whether to tell somebody very close to me that I thought there was a problem too. I thought something in their behavior was affecting one of their kids. And I got very tangled up about it, actually feeling depressed, like I don't dare say anything, but I feel like I should. And then eventually it came out and I was able to express it. It was a difficult conversation, but in the end it was done lovingly. It was done in a context of offering love and support. And part of why I did this video is because I was worried about this situation, actually. And so I was kind of living this question as I created this video. So that's what that was. All right, Mumu said, "This really hits home. I'm struggling with 2 relationships right now that are triggering me way off the charts. But if I peel back the layers, it's all my own BS that I want them to adjust for. One doesn't remember my triggers, keeps mentioning them, and I feel betrayed. A quiet storm rages inside me. The other is living recklessly and might end up in the psych ward or have their child taken away by the state if they don't slow down." Okay, very serious. "I admit I get unreasonably upset over them with anxiety attacks. I project my regrets and resentments onto them. I'm constantly giving them unsolicited advice. Yikes, who do I think I am that they should do what I say?" Well, Mumu, I think that everything that you said about who do you think you are and where you feel remorseful about giving unsolicited advice applies to the first friend. But the one who might end up in a psych ward and have their child taken away, I think is a different case, and who you are as a friend. And I think that would be a case where you express concern. And my experience is that if you can do it with utmost love and support, instead of just, you do this, you do that, you suck, I would never be screwed up like you. If you can do it with love, it's a lot more likely to be heard and helpful. I had a family in my life some time back where the kids were, it was looking to me like maybe the kids should be removed. I know a lot of you out there have had this dilemma. What's threatening about that is A, if the kids are removed and go into a foster care system, is it going to be any better than what they're in right now? But B, if you initiate something like that, as much as it's promised that you can stay anonymous, if the family finds out it was you or even suspects it's you, they will cut off all contact with the kids. And so there's always this dilemma when you're observing kids who might be getting abused, like how can you make sure that you're in their life so that you can keep an eye on things? Like either you have to go all in and get them reported and make that whole machine lurch into motion or keep an eye on things. So that's one of the really hard and difficult gray areas of when to express concern about things. So Moo Moo, I'm just saying to you, I think that having the psych ward, child taken away thing, it's time to express concern. And if that doesn't work, possibly to call authorities, honestly. All right. Tracy said, for those who find it difficult to know when offering advice or suggestions would be appropriate, simply asking, would you mind if I offer advice? Or would you be open to hearing a suggestion? That way you both know where you stand. I'll be honest, when people say that to me, I just totally go, what are they about to say? But I always will say yes. I'll go into fear, but I'll say yes. But I can tell a criticism is coming. Still though, Tracy, I think you're right, expressing that and showing that respect to say, do you want to hear it, is appropriate. And Tracy goes on to say, most times people assume that advice is what the other person wants or needs without checking in with them first. So for you, it could be a way to connect, but for them, it could be disconnecting, but not truly being seen or heard. And Carla Barron said, there were times when I was engaged in self-destructive behaviors and people called me on it, gently, but they called me on it. I was actually grateful. There were times I was as incredibly self-unaware of how I was coming across, or things that I maybe didn't want to admit to myself but needed to in order to heal. If someone I know cares for me, raises a concern, I don't see that as a form of control. I've had to raise concerns with people I'm close with, and it does come from a place of care. What they do with it is completely up to them, however. Carla Barron, you've got it. There it is. What they do with it is their concern. And again, unless somebody else is in danger here. As someone who has CPTSD, I appreciate the understanding of others. However, no one is obligated to tiptoe around my trauma or my triggers. More so, if my trauma responses victimize other people, then they really don't have to tiptoe. Yes, it's kind to hold a space for others while they're healing. The space still needs to be respected. So yeah, okay, thank you for that. Rachel Fabish said, I found this video really useful and challenging. I have a question. I'm in a new job with a focus on preventing family harm. What are your thoughts on concern shaming around this topic? It's quite normal in this work to encourage people to express their concerns. For example, your kid seems to be afraid of you. That's not okay. Do you need help? Is there a way to interrupt violence and abuse that isn't also controlling? So that's a great question. So first of all, if you're in an organization where the whole point is to prevent family harm, then of course the form it's going to take is in an expression of concern. I would imagine that you guys are in the business of providing supportive environments, creating spaces where people can talk, doing outreach, and when you see something going wrong, saying out loud that you see it and finding the gentlest possible way to go in. That's what I hear you doing. I'm so glad you're there doing that. That's great. So that is your business, all right? That is your business. When I made this video talking about concern shaming, I'm not really talking about professional work. However, since we went there, I just want to say that I think it is possible for people in a professional capacity to use concern shaming. I know that as a kid growing up in a family that had a lot of violence and alcoholism, that on the rare occasion when professionals or adults sort of noticed something was going on and talked to me, no matter what they said, I felt deeply ashamed, and I found it impossible to talk to them or admit that anything was going on. I flat out denied it to everybody, to a doctor, a neighbor who was a psychologist, a neighbor who was a nurse who noticed things, the police who picked me up once when I was out in the snow outside of a casino for many hours, and I was super self-protective and couldn't hear it. I can't say enough how much a feeling of dignity was at stake for me and people noticing that something was wrong. As a child, I really felt like my own worth as a human being was at stake if people saw what was going on. And that's just what kids do. But I think it's also what adults do. And so when you really are concerned about somebody, my rule of thumb is you can start super gentle with them at maybe 20% of the information. You know, if you want to say, rah, 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 say, ah, 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 and it'll often be enough to get the idea across and express the concern and leave a space for people to respond to what you just said. As a person with CPTSD, when I feel scared, when I feel threatened, or upset or strongly about something, I can be very intense. I don't know about you, like not everybody with CPTSD, but it's pretty common, right? I can be very intense And that's one of the sort of mitigations I've learned is if I feel this big about something, I can express myself like this, and the idea gets across much more effectively. This just sounds like yelling to people, right? Or it is yelling. All right. Written piece of paper said, "Please help. How do I know the difference between me being controlling and me setting boundaries? I added someone as an authorized user to my credit card. They almost maxed it out. I tried setting a repayment schedule, but they're calling me controlling. Am I?" All right. I'm so glad you asked this one. Because no, you're not controlling enough. That's what's going on. Not control. There's no boundary here. And there's not enough details here, but I'm assuming this is maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend or a family member who you chose to believe could be trusted with your credit card. So adding them as an authorized user of your card is putting your trust in them that they're going to spend an appropriate amount. And I don't know if you gave them a dollar limit or an expectation of paying you back or how to pay you back or how often or a payment plan, but it sounds like from what you said that either they ignored what you set up or it was never communicated to them. And either way, I'm sensing here a real difficulty setting boundaries, that this may have been like more idealized thinking that somebody could handle it and they couldn't. And now they've almost maxed out your card. So the first thing, can I give you unsolicited advice? Maybe like cut them off from the card. This is not good. Keeping that card open isn't going to cause you to get paid back or anything. And I kind of would be surprised if you get paid back if they disrespected the other boundary. It's not controlling. That is your money and your card. So that is not inappropriate for you to control. I totally sympathize though. You wouldn't be on this channel, I think, if you didn't have CPTSD and that abuse and neglect in your childhood hadn't like muddied the water for you about like, can I share my credit card with somebody and expect them to honor me? With this person, no, it turns out. This may be an expensive live and learn opportunity here, where you start to learn that if you're going to share money with somebody, there needs to be a much clearer agreement between you. But anyway, I really do hope you get paid back. I hope you use this as an opportunity to step up strong and set your expectations with this and do your best to save the relationship. Money problems, huh? You know what's funny about money? Like, not having money certainly brings up a lot of stress, but funnily enough, people who have money also seem to go into a lot of stress about money. So a lot of it has to do with the way we share money with other people. So I hope you get this worked out and to a good mutual agreement, and that you get paid back, and that after this, you feel more empowered to set your boundaries about this, about limits and payment. All right. So Destroy Raiden said, this one's kind of a snarky comment. So, all concern is bad. All asking someone about where they're going or what they'll be doing is bad. Asking them to stop doing things that trigger and hurt you is bad. So I can see this email is getting very global here. It's about all things. And Destroy Raiden probably knows really well. Of course, I didn't say all things are bad, but I'll read on. It just feels like you're supposed to be detached from your loved ones until they decide to tell you something. And it cuts off bonding entirely, as you can't ask about anything in their life or suggest they do something or help themselves. So why should they ask about you or care to suggest things to you? And it also feels like you're saying you can't tell them how their actions are triggering and harming you to set up a boundary, or don't do that. Destroy Raiden, what you're saying right here, it just sounds so much like my mind when I'm in distress about people. I think you've just articulated perfectly the confusion about like, what can I say? What can I reasonably expect? Why don't people care about me? All that stuff. What you're describing, I'm not sure if that's where you meant to go, but I'm feeling you, okay? So I hear you about how painful it is when no matter how much you ask people what you need and to respect boundaries, like desperately needing some boundaries around your privacy or your basic needs, and they're just tromping all over them. I had an older brother. He died when he was 38. I was 31 from drugs and alcohol. But the whole time he lived, he was a boundary crusher. I was anxious all the time that he was, if he got in touch with me, I would become anxious. If he knocked on the door, I often wouldn't let him in. I had a really hard time like holding the boundary on him. He had spent his whole life. He was the one who tortured me. He used to steal my little babysitting money, all my little dollars. I would hide them under my mattress and he would find them. He would read my journal. So I had trouble keeping boundaries with my brother. So I know how fraught it gets. And so sometimes not being able to maintain your boundaries does develop this kind of compensation thing of controlling. Now, whatever I had to do to control my brother's behavior, I basically consider legitimate, to keep him out of my life or to keep him from, completely wrecking things in some social situation that he might enter into when he was drinking or using. But there are many other relationships where that same controlling behavior carried over and it wasn't appropriate. And when we get controlling, we push people away. Now, when I made this video last week, I focused on when people do it to you and it feels yucky. And a lot of people, I'm so proud of you for this really, a lot of people self-reflected and said, you know what, I do that, and I do too. I do the controlling behaviors, I have them done to me. And the more I am in touch with how much I don't like it when people do this to me, the more I'm able to stop doing it to other people. So as I heal from CPTSD, it's more and more rare that I have people who are total boundary crushers in my life. It still happens, but it's not the huge problem overwhelming my life that it used to be. That gradually changes with healing. And so likewise, my need to control isn't getting all mixed up with situations that are actually dangerous or anything. And I have the luxury of really looking at, when am I asking people to observe a boundary and when am I crossing the line into controlling them? There's just like a line that's crossed. And it's never going to have a neon sign around it so you know when you're crossing the line. So you're going to have to be tuned into the situation. You're going to have to be tuned in, reading other people about it. One thing I use is a rule of 3. My husband takes off his shoes and leaves them on the side of the bed where I get into the bed. And when I get up in the middle of the night, I trip over his shoes. So I say, will you move your shoes? Don't put them by the bed. I trip over them in the middle of the night. And sometimes it happens after I've already gone to bed, so I don't know they're there, right? And he says, yes, of course I'll do that. Well, guess what? He forgets, and the shoes are there. I've probably asked him 10 times. 10 times is too many. Rule of 3. Ask 3 times. If they still can't or won't do it yourself. Now, these shoes are not anything I would ever even consider leaving my cool husband for. But I don't like it. I've gotten testy with him about it. And you know what I do? When I come to bed, I move the shoes myself. And when I wake up in the middle of the night and I need to get up, I just remember now I walk gingerly, and if there's shoes there, I kick them out of the way and continue to walk, and I just handle it. For something of that size, it's not worth getting into continuous criticism with him or to argue about. It's just something that's worth adjusting. And I won't do it, but I could list a dozen things around the house. I happen to like, with jars and Tupperware, I want them put away with the top on. Nobody in my family really thinks that's important, and it just drives me insane. And it's time for me to stop complaining about it. All right. So that's something, those are nice, easy examples of where I can ask for something I want, but at a certain point, to continue asking when I can't get it is controlling behavior. And if I want to just stick around, and I do, I love my family, I'm going to have to find another way to deal with it. See, I just feel like you should be able to go into the cupboard and get a Tupperware thing with the top and not have to dig around for something that matches for 5 minutes. I don't like that. And honestly, because I'm dysregulated, I get very dysregulated. It helps me to have things kind of orderly like that. It helps me and helps me conserve focus and patience, and peace inside to be able to have that. On the other hand, having arguments and being all resentful about it sabotages my peace of mind. So I weigh it up and I go, oh gosh, I'll just get the freaking top and put it on here. And every once in a while I sit down on the floor and I go into the cupboard and I put tops on everything. And there's always a few things that have lost their tops and I chuck those. That's how I do it. All right. That's my happiness solution. You thought it was magic. No, it's just practical. So I hope that helps to clarify both the when someone's in danger, don't worry about looking controlling, just do the right thing. When something's really trivial, see if you can solve the problem yourself, and try to be thoughtful about that middle ground that's kind of gray, about where you want to express your boundaries or express your concern to somebody without overstepping, and how you can do that. So much of recovery is about learning to express ourselves. In order to become our real selves, we must express ourselves, right? So the path of recovery is always going to involve this sort of experimentation where you do express yourself and you get a response or a reaction, and sometimes you get cooperation and sometimes you get conflict, and you begin to learn what happened. Now, if you're like me, getting into conflict is very very dysregulating. And that's why I teach the daily practice. That's the free course. I put it under every video I make. It's free. You can learn these techniques in less than an hour, but they can help to unpack the stress of being in conflict with people, or to be confused, or to not know the right thing. You have a place to put those thoughts and take a rest from them. And my experience is that having used these techniques, you come out of that, of the writing and the meditation, just a little bit clearer about what the next step is, about what is this situation, what ought I to do about it? Have I been wronged? Have I done something wrong? Finally, there's a way to get some clarity about that, and it helps tremendously. And these are techniques I recommend doing twice a day. So I won't get into teaching those right here, but I just want to mention them. I want to mention them again and just say they're free, and if you sign up for the course, you'll be invited to twice monthly Zoom calls with me where we use the techniques together and I take questions. So if you want to chat with me, take that course, come to the calls, and I'll see you there. If you love this topic about boundaries, I'm going to set up a next video for you right over here, and I'll see you next time.